Hello, Internet. My name is Ryan Ingram, and this is the 5th episode of the Millionaire by 30s series. So, in this episode, we're going to talk about spending money. We're going to cover what you should do with money when you get it, what should you do with money before you get it, and we're also going to touch on why the rich keep getting richer. It all ties in this episode. So, the past episode, we talked about earning money and exactly all of the things that you need to start incorporating as you're looking for a job or working a job. And now this is where the rubber really meets the road. So what are you going to do with money once you get it? All right, so in the third episode, we covered money and the fact that it's not real. So as we're talking about this, keep this in mind. Okay, so after you earn money, you're gonna have expenses. And in those expenses, you have things like food, shelter, clothing, not travel, but like transportation, the basic needs that you have in order to continue functioning in some sort of reasonable life, right? So those are your average expenses. So let's just write those up here. On these expenses, I also want to break it down and you have necessities and then just extra. All right, so this is a really rudimentary list of categories, but I wanted to break it down in necessities and just extra stuff. So under your necessities, you're gonna have things like food, shelter, transportation, clothing, the things that are essential to you. That's a good buzzword for the times that we're in. And you're gonna have to have these almost regardless of where you're at in life. Now, on these things, this is like the more finer things of life, right? The luxury clothing, the nicer things, you got dining, entertainment. These are things that you don't have to have, but these are things that kind of make a, fun life. I'm not gonna say a quality life. You can have a phenomenal life without any of these things. But these are just common categories of expenses. Just again, super rudimentary. All I want to do right now is prove points and talk about theory and kind of ideologies. Knowing that these are the expenses, then the majority of people that have no financial education, the poor people, biblically speaking, there's always going to be poor people. So in theory, this is just a very broad brushstroke of why poor people are poor, people that don't have any financial education, right? So we're going to use the imagery of buckets. I'm really going to put my artistic talents to work here, but I want you to, and I'm going to explain the low income people as not having a bottom of a bucket, right? So if this is your bucket, I won't draw any handles or anything because we need all of this. Then they're not going to have a bottom. So while these expenses are still very much so real for them, there's no budget, there's no handling of money. As soon as money is earned, it comes right into the bucket and goes right back out. There's no retention of that whatsoever. At some point in your life, we've probably all been here. I know I have. This is something that I can relate to tremendously because I didn't have a financial education. I received money, I was paid money for a task, and then once it was done, I went out and I found things to spend that money on. And I want to be clear, like on this same token and in the same kind of imagery, just because money's coming in and going right back out, that doesn't mean that some of these items aren't in here. Especially because once you start studying finances, you start learning that it doesn't really matter how much money you make, right? You can have somebody that truly just lives off welfare or the government, and this is the case. Any welfare money received comes right back out. You can have somebody that has no financial education, but they make $300,000 a year. They have more money coming in, but they have just as much money going out. You see this all the time, like the keeping up with the Joneses stereotype. They might have nicer things in here because, they can afford it. The money that I shouldn't say that they can afford it. What I should say is the just sheer volume of money that passes through this bucket can buy things that are nicer. You might have, an Audi, a Mercedes or something in here, but there's no retention. So it's relying on this income in order to make that payment, but it's all going out. Nothing is being retained. So just because you have a nice house, a nice car, you spend your money on a lot of things. If you don't have a financial education, all of your money is being spent immediately. There's no retention whatsoever. All right, so let's level this up a little bit. So now let's go over somebody that has just a little bit of financial education. So somebody somewhere told them that they need to have a checking account. They need to have a savings account, right? So that's kind of this partial bucket, right? So with a savings account, just with the idea of that imparted in them saying you need to make sure that you always have money in your savings account, right? Well, you still have things like food, shelter, transportation, and clothing, right? So regardless of who you are or how much money you make, you have to buy food. So there's a tiny little hole in the bottom of the bucket, right? That's a necessity. That's something that you cannot get away with. Shelter is almost the same thing. So let's put that in the bottom of the bucket, right? Transportation, clothing, all these basic human needs are little tiny holes. So now you have entertainment, dining, luxury clothing, nicer things, right? You're not going to cut those out, but as your bucket fills up, you're going to get more and more of those nicer things, right? So now, because you have this education, the bottom of the bucket, right? You have just a little bit of understanding. So now when money comes in, it does accumulate a little bit, but it is also coming out. So now the finer things, this luxury clothing, you accumulate a little bit more money, and now you've got more money coming out in these areas. But what's going to happen? This job that you're working, this financial education that you have, right? When money has to constantly come in here because you're constantly losing. So if you wait a little bit, then all of this is going to empty out. Now, before you know it, you're going to run out of money because you have all of these holes that aren't being addressed. If you're living this way, it's constantly relying on more money coming in. Again, let's say that you win the lottery. You've got tons of money. You've got more money that you know what can do with come in all at once, right? You're going to have a larger bucket because you're going to have tons of money, right? But nonetheless, what's going to happen? Sure, it might be up here for a little bit, but because all of these things are a reality, it's all going to drain out. All the money is going to go away. All right, so now let's go over another bucket. And this is going to be somebody that has just a little bit more financial education, right? So they know that they need a savings account. They know that they always have to have money in their bank account. They know that they should constantly be saving money. But they still have the food, they still have the clothing, the transportation, the shelter. Let's see here, entertainment. You've got the luxury, right? But you've got just a little bit more education. So now, since you're working a job that pays you money, as you have money coming in, you work for an employee, just a little bit nicer of a job, right? And they say, you know what? You should contribute to what's called a 401k. You should let us hold on to money for you, right? So now this employer, they divert, I wish I could make this stream just a little bit bigger, but now they divert, let's say 4% of your income. Let me write that. I don't know if you can see that, can you? So now they divert 4% of your income into this smaller bucket. You still have the same problems over here, right? So your paycheck, you're still getting paid, so you have a little bit of retention, but nonetheless, all of this money is still going out, right? But now you have this 401k, so this makes you feel a little bit more comfortable because you can get to the end of the month, you can spend all of your money, but you could think to yourself, I'm okay, I have this 401k in the background, or an IRA. So now this bucket is slowly being full. Now, some people I know have several millions of dollars in this bucket, right? They've been sold on the idea that this bucket is going to take care of them in retirement. But see, here's what happens. Once the income stops coming in, because remember, as we just talked about, this is dependent because it has holes in it, right? So this is dependent upon you continuing to pour money or pour income into this bucket. You still have all your expenses, all of that. So this bucket is going to empty out. Now, when this bucket gets empty, here's the idea. No more income, empty bucket, you wipe that away. This concept is kind of sold as retirement, right? So now, when you have no more income, no more bucket, you're living that retired life. 401k, come over here, right? But check it out. Now you've got your 401k bucket. You've got no active income. Nothing is coming in, right? You've got a full bucket. Your golden years. You've worked your whole life to get here. You've got tons of money in here. You're going to withdraw it. They've convinced you that, the stock market is going to give you, 4% per year. So there's going to be this tiny little trickle of money that comes in here. But what happens? You live a good life. You have food, you have shelter, you have entertainment, you have clothing, you have nicer things, whatever it is, right? All this money starts leaking out of your bucket. What's going to happen? 10 years goes by. 15 years goes by. 20 years goes by. After the 15 years goes by, you're going to have to start cutting stuff out. You're going to have to make sure that you don't spend any more money on nicer things. You're going to have to watch that a little bit because you start to notice all these things go away, right? This tiny little trickle of the 401k, as your amount gets smaller, guess what? So does that percentage. This trickle gets lighter and lighter. 20 years goes by and you're really starting to fret. And now all of a sudden, you've got no money. This is empty. It's all dried out. Everything passed through your hands and went right out. Unfortunately, this story is all too common. So let's take this first example of somebody that has, no financial knowledge, right? All their money goes straight in, straight out. You add a little bit of financial education. Now you're starting to accumulate a little bit, but it's still all coming out. And now, full circle, you have a job that offers you a 401k. It's this tiny little bucket that's coming over here. But as you just noticed, at some point, if that's what you're relying on, then it's going to transition over here. And now, before too long, you're no different than the person with no financial education. The last thing you ever want to do is outlive your money. I hope you treated everybody in your life good. I hope you don't mind being taken care of by the government, which honestly, at this point, is not a bad deal because now we know they could just print money. There's no consequences to that, right? All right, so now let's talk about super savvy people and how they go about spending their money. Okay, so what a super savvy individual would do is they would at first start out with one income stream, right? They go ahead and preemptively get a hold of this, or they learn along the way. It really doesn't matter. But they've got their bottom of the bucket. They know that they need to have accounts that they store money in for those rainy days, right? But here's what happens. The savvy people, they get these holes absolutely as small as they can. So while they're still there, they're going to try to plug them with whatever they can in order to make them as small as possible. So you hear a lot of people, you hear a lot of millennials especially living with their parents for an extended amount of time. I'm not saying that all of that is because they're savvy with their money. Some people might just be really lazy. But finding a way to minimize your food cost, minimize your housing expense as much as possible in your early years. That way, this money could accumulate. Now, once this is limited, sure, money is still going out. That's fine, right? But to a certain point, you're going to want to start your own kind of 401k example. One of the best books that you could possibly read right now is called The Richest Man in Babylon. Phenomenal read. But if you set up a hard rule for yourself that 10% of all of your funds goes over here into another bucket that you own. So as you continue to earn income, you have this secondary account that just fills up with money. There's no need for this at all. This is just 10%. It's entirely yours. As you get older, this bucket is going to continue to hold more and more and more because that 10%, you're going to lock it away. Okay, so housing, that's something that you have to have, right? Now, check this out. It's called house hacking, where you like buy a duplex and you live in one unit and rent out the other one. So now this money is going out, but it's going into another bucket that you created to catch some of the money that you have to spend on housing, right? And now this housing bucket, it's going to have expenses of its own, but that is going to be able to accumulate money for you. So now you're trying to save more of the money that you have to bleed out. So there are creative things that you can do to, even though you have to spend money on some of these expenses, you can go above and beyond and figure out how can you recapture some of the expenses or even turn it into income, right? So transportation, a lot of people, especially now, are doing DoorDash, Uber, things like that. So now the money that you're bleeding from transportation, you have some of it go back in. And when some of it goes back in, 10% goes over into this bucket, right? Babylon, the richest man in Babylon. 10% of all you make is yours to keep. Now, as we talked about yesterday, when you are earning money, you're always going to figure out how can you provide more value, right? So you want more income and you want to focus on income coming in. So as you increase your income, you're also increasing this 10%. So the main thing that you want to do is focus on limiting all of your expenses. Look for opportunities to either turn your expenses into something that you can make money or keep more of. Any free time that you have that you're not utilizing, how can you make that into more income and save 10%, be building this nest egg. Okay, so the whole idea here is that you're gonna take all of your expenses and you're gonna limit them as much as possible. You're gonna look for opportunities to turn your expenses into either an alternate form of income, or you're going to figure out how to limit them as much as possible and also make money doing this too. In this example, if you were to house hack, you would actually be making money in tax savings and appreciation, but that's another video. Now, once you start saving money and accumulating more money in this bucket, you're going to become a lot more stable. You're going to become able to do a lot more things, right? So now you're in this ability where you can now start building wealth tremendously fast. Okay, now as I've shared in law enforcement, I was saving over 50% of my income. So now that I have more money than I can spend in a month, now I can go over and I can start saving even more money. So I'm going to create another bucket of income. So now instead of just diverting my income into this 10% bucket, that's still going to happen. But now I have the ability to divert some more into another bucket that is 40%, right? So 40% of my income is now going into accounts that I do not need. As money is accumulating here, I now have the ability to find ways to make passive income. So I don't want to get bogged down in investment opportunities. That's going to be the next episode. But now with this bucket, it's got no purpose other than to make sure that I never run out of money in the future. All right, so now with this bucket's only job is to make you more money, right? You can borrow from this bucket anytime you want to. It doesn't mess up any of your normal expenses. This bucket is standalone. It can stand by itself once it gets a certain dollar amount in there. So now this is what I did is I started a real estate investing company. So I took money from here, I put it into another bucket, and I purchased rental properties. So this bucket has money, but rental properties have expenses, right? So it doesn't necessarily have this foolproof thing. There's utilities, it's a duplex, I have to pay those. There's landscaping, snow removal, all of that. So payments are gonna come out of here, but it has become its own rental income source because even though there's all these expenses for me, people are also paying me to live here. So there's money already coming into the bucket. And anything that isn't spent, it doesn't just fall out into somebody, right? It gets funneled over here. Or what a lot of people do is, since this is a separate company, I just refunnel it right back into the company. And this is the coolest part, because this is going to be a self-sustaining business once you keep putting in work. Yes, it's going to take time. Yes, you're still going to have all of the responsibilities over here. It's not going to solve that, but the cool thing about this is one business. It's going to ultimately start making its own money, and it's going to start paying you. So there's no limit into how many different times you can do this. But we're going to talk about that a lot more in episodes to come. This is just the foundational groundwork that we had to lay on spending money. I wanted to give you a visualization as to why some people run out of money so quickly, why people win the lottery and then go broke, and then why some people are able to successfully utilize their money and seemingly never run out of it. All right, so thank you so much for watching. I really appreciate it. As always, please subscribe. This is a series. It's going to be awesome, and it's only going to get more awesome. So if you have any questions, if you want anything to be clarified, please comment, reach out to me, let me know. I would be more than happy to do so. Thanks so much. Can't wait to talk to you soon.